Welcome to Bad Meetings Podcast, where we embrace the awkward, the weird, and everything in between when it comes to professional and sometimes not so professional meetings. I'm Erika McKellar. I used to be a people-pleasing conflict avoider, but that wasn't working. So I went all in. I even got a master's degree in conflict resolution. And I spent the next decade learning hands-on how tough experiences can actually improve our work life. On this podcast, I chat with people who have gone through it. We break down their bad meeting story, find the lessons, and share tips on how to have better meetings. It's simple, but it's not easy. You may just learn something from someone else's mistake. Listen in and reach out if you have a bad meeting story to share. Thanks for listening. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Safwan Al Turk, a seasoned business leader on a mission to blend business strategy with healthy living to make a real impact in the wellness space. Sounds right up our alley, so I'm really excited to hear more about that. Safwan has driven growth for global giants like Procter Gamble, Nestle, Nespresso, and Samsung. No small feat, and he's now channeling his expertise into building innovative solutions, elevating brands, and empowering healthy lifestyles. Great. I love combining business and wellness. I think it's so important these days. But Safwan, your achievements go way beyond the professional realm. You're someone who constantly pushes boundaries, and I can resonate with that. Whether it's summiting one of the 7 summits, need to hear more about that, or completing a 10-day silent retreat. I might be able to do that. I'm not sure though. And perhaps your biggest challenge, you said, is getting the green light from your partner and your family for these adventures. I can definitely resonate with that.
Yeah.
So welcome, Safwan. I'm gonna let you say hello and welcome you to our guests, to our listeners, and then I want you to jump right into your bad meeting story.
Erika, thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited for this because when you reach out to me regarding this topic, I really reflected on it and I realized that we all have these kind of like interesting stories, and I'm sure a lot of people that they're starting their career or even they are basically still in the ladder. And I'm sure that they will learn a lot of like the people that they went through that journey without even falling into these traps. But anyway, it's always better also to learn by personal mistake, because this is part of the growth. And yeah, I have really interesting a couple of stories, but I think one of the things before we start, since you mentioned that I've been in Dubai for almost 15 years, which is something I'm really proud of. I work with the big multinationals. You already mentioned them. However, also I work with like diverse cultural, basically from markets from Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, to the whole Northern African market. So that also pushed me to develop my, I would say, set of social skills. But however, we are not immune to mistakes. And this is where my story takes me to the amazing experience I had with the company like Samsung, where it's, of course, we all know that it's South Korean, and being a little bit on the management and the leadership position, you are always exposed to be meeting up with executives, with board members, even with a client. And I had, of course, a lot of like occasions where I had to be the interface of the brand and interface of even my department, smartphone business, where I had the opportunity to conduct meetings, business reviews in the presence of the local regional president, even in the regional market. So yeah, I would and dive into the story, and I would really share it in a very kind of like interesting manner. And this is where I think with all the experience that you get working with the different type of colleagues, different cultures, that even if you are prepared, where the level of confidence when you prepare to any meeting, it goes like to the roof, and you are always like with that mindset that I'm gonna nail this meeting easily. However, when you are in the meeting itself, things might fall the crack, and this is where my personal mistake it took place, where I did not, I would say, consider the cultural relationship between the management and the leadership team. And of course, when you are running through the presentation, you did not basically allow this kind of like engagement and discussion. And this is where I believe that with all the practices that you conduct any kind of a business review or like in big meetings in the presence of the leadership, sometimes you take this for granted, although you are experienced, and you do not allow this kind of like open engagement. And unfortunately, this is one of the biggest mistakes that I reflected on after the meeting, that I did not allow this engagement. I did not give this kind of a room for the leadership to pitch in into their conversation.
Okay. So definitely been there where you assume something about your audience, right? And you're so ready for it. You're ready to answer all these questions in this specific area. And you show up and either the vibe in the room is totally different or the questions that you get are totally different. And
Yeah.
I think we have all been there. And if you could walk us through maybe some specific examples of the cultural differences that you encountered in this meeting with the executives and how that impacted the conversation, I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, it's really important to look into how some of the cultures work, especially when you attend these kind of meetings, that you can imagine that there is a preparation steps that you have to take into consideration. The seating of the management and the attendee should be in a structured way. Of course, there is two different way of presenting, either standing or even on your seat. So also we have to look into these elements based on the preference of the leaders or basically the board members, how they would like to conduct the meeting. And this is one of the things, again, I would refer because I was really good from a logistical point of view to make sure that the preparation of the meeting is set. However, when you are basically in the middle of the discussion, this is where it becomes really interesting how to articulate the idea, give room to everyone to add their point of view. And this is basically, this is my personal story that I was, there is a thin line between confidence and ego. And this is where I realized that, okay, I think I stepped to my ego because the engagement was not healthy. And I did not even allow myself to give the room for the leadership team to add into it. I wouldn't say
Okay, so you jumped in there, you had your meeting prep. Let's say you went over it 100 times at home, you were so ready to go, and you just sort of barrel through it. Or strap on your oxygen mask and your crampons and you just go for it, right?
yeah, usually, yeah, it's something that when you, again, it's like I speeded up through the whole conversation, of course, the business review, all the points, and I did not give this kind of leeway for discussion, thinking that this is the requirement, and this is something that I really learned. I did not really understand before the meeting what is the level of like, kind of like the frequency or the pace of the meeting should be, and what are the key points that we need to cover. And again, this is something that because of my preparation that was on point, but the way I led the meeting in front of course, yeah, the other team members that did not add value to the meeting, that I did not run it in the right way, and I went through the conversation or the whole basically the pitch without even giving the room for discussion. And again, it's something that I did not consider from the culture point of view how they look into it, because I conducted this several times and it went smoothly in some cases. But this is something that I would really refer to it to really learn ahead of time, part of the preparation. What's the type of conversation? What's the pace? What's the room of like kind of opening the conversation between the team members and the attendee?
And what specifically, if you were, let's say we're speaking to a listener who's having the same conundrum right now. They're prepping for an executive meeting or for a manager meeting. They're not quite sure what the cultural vibe in the room is going to be. There's only so much you can assume in advance. What would you have done differently, or what advice would you give someone who's about to go into a meeting like this to make sure that they're prepared to handle perhaps a different vibe than they were expecting?
That's a good question, actually. It's really important when you work with a diverse kind of like environment is to really try to understand or speak some of your colleagues or friends, or even from the top management, like a mentor or someone like with a leadership position. Try to reach out and try to understand what are the ways usually these meetings are conducted, and not to take it as based on your previous experience and try to run the show the way you are used to. And this is the mistake that when I entered this environment, I was highly confident. I know my information and I have this kind of a body language, for example, that I can be articulating the idea, trying to pinpoint to the presentation. But in reality, this is where I realized that this is not the way I should conduct. So my point of advice that when you are entering a totally different environment, either a company or even a total different company culture, it's really important to step away a little bit, try to understand these meetings, how usually they are conducted. And if you have an access to someone who can give you an advice on how the leadership would like to review, do you have a pre-read document? Do you share any information with them before the meeting? This information really helps you position yourself as a thought leader, as someone who knows his basically position and what is the value that he can bring to the table. And yeah, this is something that I took for granted and I learned it the hard way.
Oh, I understand that. And if you're somebody who I can make this assumption about you, Safwan, that you're probably really comfortable getting in front of people and speaking about something you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And I understand that and how that feels. So when this happens to you, or when you realize that things aren't going the way that you want, it's sort of like, oh crap, what do I do now? What was that exact moment where you realized things were heading south and not going in the direction that you wanted?
It's a really weird feeling. You reminded me with it. I wouldn't say trauma, but yeah, it was really bad, and I had to pause for like almost 30 seconds just to catch my breath, because I'm sure that my heart rate went to the roof. But yeah, luckily also it's really important to I was able to rely on the team members around me that at least to support me, and they stepped in just to try not to cover up, but just to add a little bit of an input based on the conversation that we were running, and that really helped me just to go back, control my breath, and it's really important. Something also in the board meetings or in other meetings, try to increase the level of self-awareness and try to not hold breath, try to control and focus on your breath. That will give you a little bit like, of course, like a couple of like seconds to settle down, to refocus, and to go back. And something that also in that experience specifically, I was really open about basically the mistake that I've done. And of course, I shared my point of view that yes, I have done mistake in this one. If there is any point that we missed, I would love to cover it again and discuss it in detail. And I would say that was accepted well. Actually, it was well received. And at the same time, it really taught me that, okay, how from now on, how to consider these points we covered from preparation, taking the cultural aspect, what's the type of kind of like conversation, the tonality, even the language. Sometimes we assume that everyone speaks a certain kind of in speed or like in English in an articulated way. But sometimes in some cultures or some companies, they don't have this kind of like speed to catch up what you're saying. So you need also to slow it down. And I received this several times. If you can slow down, I think your ideas will be articulated. This is why even now I'm trying to always be cautious, aware that my speed, how to tone it down based on the audience. It's really important that you'll be able to deliver the message in the right way, to deliver in clarity, and without missing any point you need to deliver.
That's so smart. And I really like that you brought up about owning up to your mistakes and how your coworkers jumped in to sort of like help you get through that moment. That's what good coworkers do. But the fact that you spoke up, there's a strength to doing that and saying, you know what, like, I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to that question. Let me get to you. I think that can be such a powerful thing to say, even more powerful than knowing the right answer, right? Because we're all human and it happens, right? We expect something and we prepare for something and it doesn't happen the way we want. And, the only thing to do is to really own up to that. I think that's really solid that you learned that lesson. And you also talked about self-awareness, and I'd love to touch on that because I'm like obsessed with self-awareness, like probably to the point where, I don't know, people think it's weird. I love, doing, self-personality tests, things like that. Not that I take them as gold, but I find them so insightful because things change. You change as you learn, as you grow, as you get older, as you have children, as you get married, your risk levels change. Perhaps not you and I, but, we wish we could climb the mountain every day. But we also, too, have other responsibilities. But what tools or resources have you used to increase your self-awareness?
That's a really interesting area we can cover. Again, we learn by the mistake more than an accessible knowledge. Of course, you can always read and understand what YouTube to prepare or to listen to someone. But it's really important, again, that self-awareness is a journey and not a destination. And as you mentioned, that we evolve with age, with an environment, with the surroundings, with the everything related to how the environment will impact you, that this is where your self-awareness starts to evolve. But we are humans and we are always exposed to mistakes, where in every occasion, I would say, in the corporate and the personal life, my mountaineering journey and my science retreat, it was all of them like a touch point on how to discover myself. And of course, how to be in the moment, try to not to be, I would say, impacted by the surroundings, how to also look into my stress level, where basically it's still that, I wouldn't say it's easy, but self-awareness becoming, self-awareness becoming really key, that really to focus on, try to at least bring a little bit of like simple rituals. Like, for example, now I have a conversation with you. Sometimes you are in the moment, you don't focus on the idea you need to deliver, just slow it down, take it a breath, and then try to articulate it in a better way. So yeah, so that
Do it together right now.
yeah, that takes me back to the silent retreat if you want to tap into, because it was I would say it's a life changer or a wake up call, but it's really was a good exposure how this kind of like self-centered, and how the everything that impacts us consciously and subconsciously, and this has a big influence how we look into things. And again, this experience was a decision that for multiple reasons I want to have this kind of repeat talk, but my experience exposed me to the self-awareness and try to, it's a simple act, but it's really difficult because it's that simple. And we are now with the modern society, I would say, we are hyper connected. We're all over the place. Our responsibility is becoming really interesting, and we are always connected with this and that. And this is where we miss this kind of self connection and awareness. And again, it's something topic I'm not that expert, but I'm in the journey of exploring it.
Oh, you and I both. I do spend a lot of time on mindfulness. I haven't yet done a silent retreat, but I've definitely done some self-awareness retreats that have been life-changing. And I'd like to jump into this topic a little bit more because I think this relates to what you're doing now in the wellness space. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and how your experiences with the big organizations that you've worked for sort of brought you to that space? That would be a great place to go next.
I was actually during my journey in these corporate, I was lucky enough to be always identified by the person who put the colleagues and the people surrounding, even the management, to take care of themselves, being active, try to pick up and remove the snack and bring the fruit, take the certain step of the elevator. And then I was a bit far away from the kind of like mental fitness, which is something that I'm really tapping into, and not only the physical fitness. And of course, that starts with the self-awareness, the practices you do, how you kind of like work on your empathy with your colleagues, with your friends, and something that I was being lucky to join or to initiate some of the activities in the company. And of course, that it led me to the point that after this whole journey, that why I cannot take this and try to scale it in a different way. And this is what led me to look into the corporate journey, which is something that I'm really proud of, and how I can really consider in creating something that has a bigger impact and have a mass impact on multiple verticals, learning from my personal experience. Start with the mindset, which is the mental fitness, the nutrition, something basic that we all fall under the trap of trying to maintain a good, healthy eating habits. And the same time for the movement and being active, regardless what type of sport or activity you do, and the recovery that includes everything when it comes to the mobility, range of motion, and sleeping. So this is basically became, I would say, my core pillars of focus. And since I left in 2022, I started to really focus on how to bring this my experience when it comes to the business strategy and applying on the wellness, regardless if it's like healthy consumer packaged goods, wellness solutions, bio wearables, and of course, trying in the same time, whoever basically is willing to take a simple advice from the basic stuff I do, I'm more than happy to share and discuss. I don't want to be a coach. I'm not a life coach. I'm not a trainer. I'm not a personal trainer. But I would say I have experienced it the hard way. So this is something that I'm really proud of.
Well, that's what this podcast is all about, is learning from our mistakes and sharing those learnings so that others can, grow without having to make these sometimes painful mistakes. They're hard when you're going through them. And I think one thing that I hear a lot is like, oh, you need to separate your emotions from business, but we're human beings and that's literally impossible. So being able to, like you said, reflect on how it is, things impacted us, how we impacted others, and then working on making sure that we do it better next time is such a key lesson. And it sounds really simple, but it's not easy.
Not easy. When you're in the middle of it, it's not easy. And again, it's like reflecting on my last friend with the multinational like Samsung. It was, now I'm reflecting on it. I'm really happy that I went through this kind of different working culture, or the whole environment was really intense because again, it's competitive. The whole industry is competitive. The working culture is unique. So again, referring to the meeting that I went through, or the kind of engagement or with the leadership or with the management that didn't go well or as per my expectations, something that now I can reflect on and say, okay, these are the learning. This is the approach that I need to take it. When you jump into a total different environments, how you bring a little bit of positive influence and how you learn this kind of like communication skills, social skills, to be empathetic, to really understanding. You cannot just push your agenda or the way you think, thinking that they will be receptive. And this is something that it slapped me on the face several times. Now I can say I wouldn't say I'm happy, but yeah, it's like it became like sometimes a joke and the learning in the same time.
I love that. I love how open-minded you are to those experiences and to sharing those experiences. I personally have worked all over the globe as well. I worked for in the US for many years, in Europe, and I also worked for 3 years in Morocco. So I've seen like a whole gamut of differences, cultural differences. And it doesn't mean that you need to like study and change yourself for every culture that you work in, but it does mean that you need to sort of adapt and grow personally. And like you said, mental fitness, which I'd like to hear a little bit more about, adapt and strengthen your mental fitness to be able to get to adapt quickly to change, read the room, have confidence, of course, be prepared, but go in also with flexibility and an open mind. So if you could talk a little bit more about mental fitness and people who are looking to increase their mental fitness, where would they begin?
The way I look into mental fitness, and not I'll separate a little bit to the mental health, because something that we're not experts in that space personally, but the way I see it from a mental fitness is something I would start with the self-awareness, try to understand a little bit about your personality and where you fit in a certain environment. And of course, it takes really good time, try to reflect personally and see the people around you, how they look into you and in a certain environment. That, for me, it's a point number one. When it comes to number two is about, I would say it's stress management. It's more related about being resilient and being adaptable in a certain situation, even through a tough time or a deadline you need to deliver. And what are the things that you can really depend on when it comes to certain practices? Call it like breathing techniques, call it kind of like going for a walk. This by itself, this kind of ritual that you believe that they can anchor you to be in the right mindset. This is where I call like it to be resilient in the moment. And the third point is something that I've been trying to look into it recently, how to be unstressable, and something that I've been reading a lot recently, and how to look into this kind of like micro stresses and the macro stresses. And of course, we are in the corporate environment. Even if you are a startup, you are a solopreneur, or in any environment, how this kind of being aware about these small kind of micro stresses that can compound and add up to collapse in any moment. And sometimes we got really angry from the traffic, from any kind of like being late for a certain meeting. And we think that this occasion that cause us this kind of a panic, where in reality, you have a compound of several things. For example, not preparing to the meeting, not being coordinating with the other team members, and what's the scope of what's the agenda of the meeting. You end up reaching the meeting, and all the math took place without being prepared. This is where I see it like how to manage the stress and to become unstressable. These are three elements that I believe in the corporate environment can set you in a very good position to be a reference and to be a little bit like the guy who can manage everything under kind of a crisis situation.
Unstressable. I love that. I don't know if I could ever achieve it, but it's something I would want to aspire to. Uh, so continuing on in that, when I'm actually going to ask you for some personal help here right now.
Okay.
I'm working in Sweden, right? And we can talk about high context and low context culture. And if you know Erin Meyer's The Culture Map, it's pretty much a classic that came out in 2014.
Yeah.
However, I don't know if it's really applicable anymore. I think that high context and low context doesn't really tell the full story. I believe all cultures are high context. It's just being able to know what you're looking for. And so with that, in Swedish culture, there's a lot of unspoken, right? There's a lot of things, everything is said very carefully. Everything is it's quite open on the surface. But I think that there is a lot of things unsaid, and it's not going to be obvious if you're sort of missing the mark, because people are going to say, oh, everything's fine. It's sort of like a bit, keep conflict low. Let's just get through it and not pay attention to it and move on. Yeah. What advice would you give somebody who's in a culture like that, where you're not really sure what the expectations are and you're not sure how to act in a situation where are you making the mark? Or are you not? What advice would you give me in that situation?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Basically, see, Dubai is really interesting place because it can give you kind of like a platform or a place where you can try to figure out how to step away from the corporate situation and try to interact with some different nationalities and just try to have like a friendly conversation and try to understand a little bit that what are the things, that limitation that you cannot cross the limit or something that you cannot cover it personally. And this will give you a little bit of room to understand how these kind of tips, how you can apply it in the corporate. And I think markets like the Scandinavians, where more or less they are on the horizontal level of management, where you can see some countries are like more vertical. And again, I would say always refer to Dubai as the perfect example. My advice to you is to step away from the corporate environment, try to reach out to the locals and try to have like an open conversation to see how usually they handle personal topics, how they manage usually some sensitive topics. I think this will bond a little bit. You will be with less little bit of proximity to their working culture. And of course, you can take it to the workforce. This is basically where I did it in some cases. Again, I'm referring to my experience with the South Korean, which is somehow they are really unique kind of a character and personality and culture itself. So I had the opportunity to ask one of the Korean colleagues. We went out for dinner, we went out for drinks, and we had like an open conversation. How they look into us, how they look into the Arabic culture, how they look at the British culture, how they look at the Indian. And I was able to understand a little bit how they look at the things, how they receive the information, and to what level they are open to opening a little bit, going deep a little bit to the center. So this is basically the way I experience it personally.
Right. That's really, really good advice. So find someone you trust who will give you, the real deal, have an open conversation away from work and really try to understand what it is you're working with. And I think also too, in this multinational world, I mean, very few of us are working in a sort of a geographical culture exclusively anymore. There's a company culture that goes along with that as well. And I could probably guess that in the wellness space, there's a wellness culture, right? There are some companies or some groups of people, communities that are more open to that conversation about wellness, mental fitness, self-awareness than others are.
Yes, exactly. Now that's also a really important point. When it comes to for example, the mental health is really important to take into consideration. In some cultures, it's like a taboo, and they don't share it even on a family member level, which is quite annoying. I would say that we are trying to break the barrier to make sure that this conversation happens. And this is what I realized recently, that the mental health is unfortunately is a little bit becoming like a common conversation that everyone taking a really negative leverage or advantage of, where I'd rather focus on the mental fitness, something as a preventive, and not trying to figure out how we solve you, I would say, mental health issue. Where, yeah, it's really a sensitive topic related to the cultures, and still navigating a really, I wouldn't say difficult roads, but people become more and more kind of aware about these things. Vulnerability is becoming really important, especially for the leadership, and try not to also misuse it for certain objectives. And yeah, it's not something that is fully explored, but I think there is a lot of progress compared to 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being a trailblazer in that space, because we need more of it. And I think everyone's aware of the conversations that are happening with experts like yourself and on LinkedIn about mental health and mental fitness, which I really like that, because we think about, physical fitness or, before you get sick, right? So don't wait until you're sick.
True.
Make sure you're taking care of your body, your mind, and everything before you get there. And I think that's such a key point for our listeners to take home is, get to know yourself, work on your mental fitness, whatever tools work for you, mindfulness, physical exercise, all of that. It's all important. You need all of it. You can't just have one and not the other. It's going to be a Band-Aid if you don't approach all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You can always explore the thing that really can add to this. And again, I would really focus on the mental fitness, and we can refer to things that not the experiences I went through on the meetings at the corporate, just even stepping out of my comfort area. It's really gave me a lot of like mental fitness, is that trying to put myself in a really difficult situation every year. This is something that I brought back and really give me the fuel to manage my expectation and to improve my self-awareness in the corporate environment. And of course, that applies on the leaders, on the middle management, and the employees. So step away, try to explore your physical limitation and your mental limitation in certain areas. Regardless if like a very like exclusion hike or like mountain to climb or going for 10 days for a retreat, regardless, everyone has its own catalog of activities, at least to push yourself physically and mentally. And all the things that you will learn definitely will not crush you. Maybe at the moment you feel that you're crushed, but believe it or not, after recovery, after post these activities, you realize this have a positive influence on you, on loved ones, your friends, and on your colleagues in the corporate environment.
Yeah. Taking care of yourself and making yourself stronger is going to benefit everybody else around you. I love that. So, Safwan, let's yeah, it is a selfless act. Oh, I love that. There's so many good points and quotes in here that I can't wait to adapt and use myself. So I'd love to end this conversation with something that I've been curious about since we started half an hour ago. Tell me, which one of the summits that you have done has had the biggest impact on you and your life?
There are two summits that, of course, it was a really key milestone in my life. And again, we can always use these analogies of reaching the summits and all the stories that comes with it. So the Aconcagua, the one in the America, the highest in the America, is quite an amazing experience. And this is for a lot of reasons. One, it was the kind of like the turning point moving from corporate to become like kind of entrepreneurship journey. And two, the preparation and the logistics that took me try to move myself from Dubai to Argentina post-COVID, where there are a lot of limitations in flight, and the journey that took me to the summit and the big incident that happens after we reached. So these are the stories. I have a nice story that, of course, I wrote about it on my personal website. But I'll quickly, as you know now, that it wasn't easy for me to take the call after I decided to leave the corporate, just to have this kind of like a cut off by doing something beyond my limitation. Although I had really climbed mountains. I went to Elbrus in Russia, the second in Europe, which is the highest in Europe, actually. And I know this kind of like fundamentals. Going back to my experience on physical training and the mental fitness that put me in the right kind of a mindset, physical readiness to conduct this one. Two, the try to manage the flights between moving from Dubai, either to Europe, to the US, then to Chile, Chile to Argentina. It took me 24 hours with all the logistics and the packages I'm trying to reach. The 18 days climbing Aconcagua was beyond, I would say, one of the best experiences. Physically, it was really tough. The landscape was new to me. It's a bit dry on the higher altitude, but this is one of the, I would say, life experiences. And I will just one of the key points that I had spoken with a veteran climber, and this applies on all of us. He told me that, are you enjoying this climb? I said, of course I'm enjoying it, but I'm really tired. He told me that I'll give you two advice. And this bit all this from Brazil. He told me two things. One, don't look into the summit. Just take it step by step. Because if you look at the summit, you might break your neck. And I said, that's amazing. And what the second advice? He told me that whenever you go, try to carry a newspaper with you. Because when you do number two, you don't have to carry it by something. So I said, okay, that's amazing two advice that came hand in hand. He told me that these two tips, they can take it with you.
Great life lessons.
By the way, let's go back to the preparation part. Just always be prepared by a newspaper because you don't have to worry about how to carry it. That's fair enough. But yeah, it's and I will leave you with this one regarding this mountain. It was an amazing experience. After we reached the summit, one of the climbers with us had a really bad kind of, I would say, a lung reaction to the altitude. And we spent an extra like 6 hours after the cut off of being on the summit, trying to reach out to the third camp, which is for me. And again, my background really luckily helped me because I was in the Red Cross in Lebanon. And it was really with a good kind of awareness, again, with my guide, that we stayed with this guy trying to make him recover. And we were not able even to bring the helicopter to pick him up, where we had to drag them, and it took us like almost 7 hours to reach the camp 3. But something that, again, these kind of like milestones, it goes back to how my physical preparation and mental fitness pays off in these situations. And again, being unstressable, something really important, because you can imagine all these steps and the journey and the ups and downs, and how to try to maintain this kind of a mindset, mental fitness along the way. But again, I can say proudly that this was an amazing achievement. And I can always say that I'm still in the journey. You never know what type of like new experience comes of the way, but I'm really confident I will be facing it heads on.
Well said. We're always on the journey. That's a great story. And what I'll do is I'll pop the link to your blog if people want to hear more about it, because I find that really interesting. Into Thin Air was one of my favorite books. I couldn't put it down. I'm
Into Thin Air, I read the book and I was watching the movie, which is the when I was going to Russia, and I was, why I'm even reading this book when I'm on the way to the summit? It's like scariest book to read before you climb a mountain.
mental fitness, right? You're really stretching it all the way. I love it. So
Absolutely.
whether you're climbing a mountain or getting in front of executives, mental fitness is so important. Look into it. Look into some of the resources that we're going to put in the show notes. And Safwan, thank you so much for being open, for sharing your stories, for sharing your mistakes, which have led you to where you are today. I'm so grateful for that. So thanks so much for your time. And yeah, thank you everyone for listening. All right.